Wow. Thank you for having me here again. And I'm sure that my conversation with you last time about the science of the mind really sink into your mind. And you were able to ponder over it and become a student and not a follower. And you've been able to pick one or two things that can work for you and with you. And when I discussed with you the other time, we ended with a question. And the question was, how many minds do we have? It is imperative to know how many minds we have, because if we know how many minds we have, now we can put it to use to work in our favor. Out of a conscious, deliberate, determined effort, we can now be deliberate and be focused on what we are driving towards. Mind comes under two classifications. They are not two minds, just to shock you, but rather two names employed in describing states of consciousness. The subjective or conscious and the objective. We think of the conscious state as our conscious use of mind. The subconscious, also known as subjective state of mind, sometimes called the unconscious state of mind, is that part of mind which is set in motion as a creative thing by the conscious state. In the body of this text, of my context, and in my explanation, the subjective mind, which I also referred, is a subjective mind of man, which we all know and we're talking about. We find the law obeying the word, the servant of the spirit. The suggestion has proved that the subjective mind acts upon our thoughts. It is the mental law of our being and the creative factor within us. It is unnecessary at this point to go into all the details of the subjective mind and its mode of action. It is enough to say that within us is a mental law working out the will and purpose of our conscious thoughts. These can be no other than our individual use of that greater subjective mind, which is the seat of all mental laws in action, and is the servant of the eternal spirit throughout the ages, which men in the past and men in the future will keep using. The drive within us, that thing beyond control, the thing itself that is limitless. Marvelous as the concept may be, it is nonetheless true that man has at his disposal, in what we call his subjective mind, a power that seems to be limitless. This is because he is one with the whole on the subjective side of life. Man's thought, falling into his subjective mind, merges with the universe and the subjective mind, and becomes the law of his life through one great law of all life. There are not two subjective minds, I repeat, but there is one subjective mind. And what we call a subjective mind is really the use we are making of the one law. Each individual maintains his identity in law through his personal use of it, and each is drawing from life what we think into it. To learn how to think is to learn how to live. For our thoughts go into a medium that is infinite, in its ability to do and to be. Man, by thinking, can bring into his experience whatsoever he desires. If he thinks correctly and become a living embodiment of his thoughts, this is not done by holding thoughts, but by knowing the truth. Within us, there is a creative field, which we call the subjective mind. Around us, there is a creative field, which we call subjective. One is universal, and the other is individual. But in reality, they are one. There is one mental law in the universe, and where we use it, it becomes our law because we have individualized it. It is possible to plumb to the depth of the individual mind, because the individual mind is really not individual, but it is individualized. Behind the individual is the universal, which has no limit. In this concept alone lies the possibility of internal and endless expansion. Everyone is universal on this subject side of life, and individuals only at this point of conscious perception. The reader will solve, and we all use the creative power of universal mind every time we use our mind.